All right, here we go in 3, 2, 1. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, Preveticx, with Kevin Robel. Kevin is working on preventative data analysis. So he's got a long bio here, but just a little bit. He's been working for somewhere around 12 years in the D1 setting, working with college athletics. He's done some like fully incorporating an electronic records management program, doing a lot of, he was just talking with Dr. Lacey Harrison, which I'm going to introduce in just a second, about how they've incorporated the FMS or the movement screens into their medical records and how they were able to regularly go back and adjust those things. So there's a lot of injury prevention data that he's worked with. And so he's just recently started his own company called Preveticx. So it's like Prevent and then ICX. And so maybe we'll get into why the name there at some point. But again, it's about using data-driven science to prevent injuries, to improve the performance of the players or the athletes or the patients, whoever it is right there. So Kevin, welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
And then Dr. Lacey Harrison, I didn't get your bio, but hopefully you'll be on regularly. So she works at the University of Houston with Josh Yellen and Mark Knobloch, which if you are a sports medicine broadcast listener, you know Dr. Yellen and Dr. Knobloch. So Lacey, welcome to the podcast for the first time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. And so without much further ado, this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/preventative data. And then Kevin, let's get some more details on your athletic trainer story. And then Dr. Harrison, we're going to ask you the same.
Yeah, thanks. So I was certified in 01, so about 17, 18 years. Spent most of my career at the Division I level, most recently at Stanford. We were part of that renaissance at Stanford in the late 2007 to 2012, 13. And I got really interested in clinical data. I got really interested in data science and data analytics. And all the way to the point where I recognized this as a modality that was super helpful for athletic trainers. However, we've kind of become ignorant towards data a little bit, I think, just with all the hats we wear and how busy we are. And it's kind of, I had to spend a couple years really looking at how we store data, how we enter data, and how we use data. And it's kind of like this messy storage unit or this messy garage that you have to clean up at some point. But for the last 5-6 years, you've just been throwing things everywhere in the garage or the storage unit, or you drive by someone's house and their garage door's up and it's just a mess in there. It's just one of the things that you have to do at some point. And I really kind of grabbed hold of that. And there wasn't really any resources within the profession that I could lean on with respect to data science and data analytics and using clinical data to my advantage. So I had to go into the world of business analytics and cloud infrastructure and learn the language, learn the software available, learn the infrastructure available, and then apply it to medicine where there was no resources on that side either. So it was like trying to learn Chinese, but then translate it to Spanish. So it was things like profit and loss and all these terms in business analytics and these equations and formulas in business analytics that are available in these softwares. I had to kind of like redesign them just with the data that I was working with. So so I was able to translate that into a research grant for the Pac-12 that was funded back in 2014, and that involved a kind of data analytics infrastructure within the conference that we really, the conference really wanted to provide athletic trainers with a tool that was able to help them in their treatment strategies, just understanding from a global level what injury is like throughout the conference. And that allowed me to kind of leave my post and start this next venture of trying to be that resource for the profession you know, just kind of teaching that new modality to the profession in terms of data science and data analytics. There's very cost-effective software out there, infrastructure available out there. It's time for us to clean out our garage, I think, and really do a spring cleaning. And there's resources out there that can help us understand where our data is, and then try to create what people in the field tend to call a data strategy, you know, all the way from what your sources of data are in the athletic training room, what you're collecting, how to clean that data, and then how to visualize that data to really pull out the value and insight. So that's kind of a quick overview of how I got into this. And I know you mentioned, let's see, I know you mentioned Preveticx, and that's kind of a fun story about that. I was sitting with a really good late friend of mine over the holidays, and like Joe Horn, Daryl Horn, and he basically came up with the idea for Preveticx. I was struggling with what to call it, but I kept coming back to this term. We kept coming back to this term of what's called preventative analytics, and that's there's a few different types of analytics in the space that involve different types of processes. But I took that term and he basically mashed it up, and so he will definitely be remembered in that special, unique way. So that's kind of where Preveticx came from, and we are a data analytics solution provider. So we help sports medicine organizations get a handle on their clinical data, all the way from like the sources, and then getting it into a centralized environment that can then be hit with analytics and software to visualize the data and to drive that value.
All right, Dr. Harrison, what is your ET story?
Well, I've been certified since 2013. I went to Lock Haven University in Pennsylvania. So, woohoo, all my Lock Haven listeners out there, I informed them about this awesome podcast. I got my master's at Cumberland University. That's not to be confused with University of the Cumberlands in Kentucky. Cumberland University is in Lebanon, Tennessee. So I worked primarily with Cumberland Wrestling, but I also worked with baseball and football, and I was a preceptor for their program. I had a great time, and that's really where I fell in love with education. So I decided to get my PhD after that. So I got my PhD in Health and Human Performance at Middle Tennessee State University. So I graduated in August. So still kind of a baby PhD, but luckily I'm at the University of Houston right now. Go Cougs. Basketball team's killing it right now. And I'm teaching in the Master of Athletic Training program. So I love research. I try to promote research as much as I can, but I understand as athletic trainers, we're busy. I took 3 years off from practicing just to do a PhD and to work on my dissertation, and I loved it, but I know it's difficult. So I'm really excited, Kevin, to talk to you, and I really want to know what you want the students to know in our education program. What do you want us telling them? How do you want us promoting what you're doing? And how do you want us advocating for research for the practicing athletic trainer?
Yeah, great question. I was reading the 2020 standards coming up. I've come out. I haven't really been on the educational side of things, but I do know there's a renovation going on with the clinical with the standards, and I was looking at them the other day, and there was one that kind of that addressed this like this idea of data analytics and evidence-based practice, and it's really been my experience that there's this really big gap between research and clinical medicine, right? And we're trying to merge those gaps in a lot of different ways. But you know, I think really this effort is more driven around democratizing data. You know, if you wanted to, you know, back in the 90s or the 2000s, if you wanted to see if there was a correlation between concussion symptoms and reaction time, you know, before we had all these all the software, you had to find a researcher, that was going to that had experience in doing research design, and then a statistician to be able to help you with the analysis. And we've come a long way technologically speaking, and there's software available and there's infrastructure available that can help us, that we as athletic trainers can leverage in our clinical practice to not only look at that particular question, but look at the data in a way that allows you to explore it for multiple questions. There's infrastructures and software available that allow us to look at a lot of data on one screen, and there may be 3 or 4 different research questions that come out of that one dashboard. And it's just I think it's a reflection of how we can unlock the power of our clinical data, but we have to understand where it's coming from. We have to understand what format it's in. We have to understand what date means in all these other source systems, and kind of clean that up and reconcile those differences. But if I was talking to a student, it's gonna become it's sweeping. This whole concept of data analytics is using your organizational data is sweeping business, and we're part of a group that's kind of lagging behind that adoption, but it is going to become very important for professions in medicine to be able to leverage data here in the next decade or two, because that's where all this is going. You have these large healthcare systems that are adopting patient portals and like self-service analytics and giving access to giving patients access to some of their analytics. So it's where the profession's going, and I think we have to retool quickly, just because I think we are because we wear so many hats, and we've kind of neglected that clinical data side of things. I think we are at risk of losing the stronghold that we have on that clinical data, and I've seen a shift and a trend. I think, just to speak to that a little bit, there's, we work closely with other healthcare disciplines and other performance disciplines at the Division I level, but there's been this trend where we've seen some administrative positions start to be given to the sports scientists and the data scientists, and I think the reason that is they have access to this infrastructure and they have access to this data, and they can they're able to answer those tough questions in meetings, where if you don't have access to that clinical data, or can't aggregate that, or don't have an infrastructure to aggregate that to answer that, it's not going to be it's not going to be beneficial. So I think it's a call to action. I think also, we have to clean out our garage, like I mentioned.
All right. So again, specifically, like towards Dr. Harrison's question, what do you feel like she, as an athletic trainer educator, should be teaching? Like, should she just be giving them an overview? Should they kind of add in an extra course? Because it seems like every time I talk to Yellen or Knobloch, they're, well, we're going to change it up. We're going to add in an extra course. One other thing that they need to know. And so what do you feel like that she specifically needs to know?
Yeah, there's I think it starts with the infrastructure, right? So, companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google have all taken out over like 300. I think it was 300 healthcare patents between 2013 and 2017, and that infrastructure is there. So if you're using a web-based, let's see, if you're using a web-based medical record system, that data is going somewhere, right? So, and chances are it's hosted on Amazon or it's hosted on Microsoft. Those are the two kind of platforms that most of our data and software like sit in a cloud environment. So I think learning about how accessible your data is from there is hugely important. And then, from the visualization side, there's companies like Tableau, Periscope, ClickSense. These are more of the visualization softwares where you can access data that sits in the cloud, and then run your traditional analysis or build a dashboard, that is helpful for your clinicians. But I think I do think the educational piece needs to. We need to start learning about cloud infrastructure and cloud software, and at least understanding where our data is like sitting. Like, where does my Fitbit data go, or where does my wearable technology data go? We don't even know that. I just ran into a startup in San Diego where they're using wearable technology to measure hydration levels. And it could be a game changer for athletic trainers. The company's called Hydrostasis, but that's just another source that we have to deal with in the athletic training room. If we purchase 25 of those, we put them on our athletes. Oh yeah, great. It comes up on, and you get a notification when you dehydrated, but where's that data going? And how do I get that data out? And so that's where my kind of interest is, in order to help out the profession of athletic training. And if you're talking from an education standpoint, I think that's where we need to expand in our horizons a little bit and get out into those areas.
So you brought up our 2020 standards, and within those, there's a big emphasis on interprofessional education. So is this something that you suggest if programs are trying to build a course, that maybe we work in med students and nursing students, physicians assistants? Like, is this something that you see going outside of athletic training, so we're no longer in our silos?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I would probably even add that from a data standpoint, a data science standpoint, I would argue that the nurses, nursing students, fellow physicians, they don't get that either. They're more in the Western kind of education for medicine. I would say they don't get that those points either. So yeah, I do think cross-discipline education is important in this area. We can learn. Having a data scientist, teach a course in athletic training, would make sense. And not, going out and finding those professionals to teach that education is important.
Right, so I think I understood this correctly, but in the Pac-12, y'all basically all use the same system. So like here at Pasadena High School, we use Rank 1, or, I talk about Dragonfly and Max a lot. So every school in that conference uses the same electronic records management so that you can get a better view of like a large population. Is that what I understood?
Yeah. So all the schools use the same web-based medical record system, and all the screens are standardized. All the case report forms are standardized, so everyone's looking at the same screen. So we're kind of standardizing the data entry. We are, the conference wants to be able to provide that information back to the athletic trainers as a tool and a resource for them to enhance the relationship they have with their student athletes and the patient care that they provide their student athletes.
All right, so you're all looking at the same screen. You're all putting in the same data. You've talked about this Hydrasis or whatever it was, the wearable hydration equipment. We're talking about all these different wearable accelerometers and that kind of thing. Where is like the limit, or is there just it continues to grow as the technology becomes available? So kind of what are you collecting now, and what do you see collecting in the future?
I'm not collecting anything. this Preveticx is more of that resource, that consulting resource to help you understand what you guys are collecting. You mentioned the limit of what we can collect. I think as we continue down this world of the Internet of Things, and as we see technology continue its footprint in medicine, I don't know where I don't know where the limit is as far as what we can collect in the athletic training room. But historically, you know, we have everything from our structured systems, so our medical record technology, our pre-participation physical exam system, our like sport management system where we manage the athletes' schedules and things like that potentially. And then we have the unstructured data, which might be an Excel file where you're capturing FMS scores sitting on your computer somewhere, or you have a set of paper, or if you have like some data sitting on pen and paper somewhere. So that entire landscape, you know, we can now leverage to enhance outcomes.
In your opinion, is there anything specific that you think we should be researching, or anything that's lacking right now that you suggest athletic trainers should be collecting data on?
I'm kind of more of the conservative, and you know, I think before we start to expand what we're capturing, I think it's I keep going back to this garage metaphor. You know, I think we have a lot of work and effort to do first to standardize the foundation of what we're required to collect. So our SOAP note documentation, our initial injury examination forms, our treatments. I think that is, I would say that to me is the foundational piece. But you know, I do hear that there's some promise in these wearable technology. We're starting to work closer with strength and conditioning and performance coaches, and we're starting to incorporate some of those metrics into our treatment strategies. So load is a big topic on that side of the fence. If you have the ability to capture load, I think there's some promising research out there on load as a risk factor for injury and recovering from injury.
Athletic training is starting to build specialties in the form of residencies that are popping up. So eventually, I would assume there's going to be a specialty that is exactly what you're doing. So do you have any advice based on your experiences of what the student should be doing if this is what they want to do with their athletic training degree?
Yeah, I think that's a great that's a great question. And but one of my visions is that there would be a badge inside athletic training, you know, kind of like certification in PNF or certification in Mulligan mobilizations, you know, certification in data science. What that is, I think there's some different ways we can approach that. But yeah, I do see data analytics and data science as a modality, just another modality that we have. If I was talking to someone that was interested in it, there's like I said, there's really limited amounts of resources on the medical side of it. I mean, more on the rehab side of it. I had to go out into the business world and learn about some terms and software available. I had to go into I had to go over to the database side to kind of learn things. So that's as we structure this curriculum for this badge, you know, there's some certain concepts, you know, that I was really interested in, just kind of understanding that I knew where all my data was like a big load off my back. But you know, and I also see this as, I mean, I don't know when the last time, you know, the profession innovated. You know, if you talk about that, I think I had to go through kind of this metamorphosis, and I had to innovate myself in order to really understand what I was getting into. And I mean, the tape, the ankle tape. I don't know if you guys want to. I don't know when you guys how you guys would ask that answer that question, but when the last time this profession innovated, I think if you look at how we can innovate, just in some talks with Adam, that like this is one area where we're ripe for innovation. I truly believe, because we have the tools at our disposal right now. It's just we just don't know the power yet that's in this data.
All right, so I'm here in the secondary setting. So I'm in the high school. We don't have any of the wearable technology. We have the EMR. Like I said, we use Rank 1 here. So kids sign in every time they come in to get treatment. We don't do like a sign in when they're on the field, on the court, those type treatments or evaluations. And then when they sign in and we'll enter what they do for rehab or that kind of thing. So me as a new client for Preveticx, where are we going to go? Right. Cause I'm going to say, okay, well, here is all the data that I have. What are we going to do?
Right. So if like once we figure that out and we can get access to all your data from Rank 1, we would and we would want to know where your other data sources are, and there's some inconspicuous data sources that I think at the high school level, I understand there's some challenges there, but we would move that data to a centralized environment that you are able to govern and manage, and that would sit in the cloud. So we would work with your vendor, Rank 1, to get you that data and get you access to that data on a recurring schedule and move it to an environment where we can then build these dashboards. And a lot about it is more exploratory analysis, right? So you may not know what certain area you want to research, or you might not know what your data is telling you. So we might have a dashboard that shows the number of injuries across your organization broken down by sport and gender. But the content of that is obviously where we would find some more insight.
All right, so you said where else gather all the data sources. So we've talked multiple times about the AT value model, collecting some data, start somewhere, do something to collect that to show your value or to prevent injury. So here, like I said, what else would you be looking for? Or would you be saying, hey, Jeremy, do you have any blank?
Yeah, and the cost is something that we can get from like the web. So we can apply a CPT code to every treatment and every evaluation that we do. So now we're blending across another data source, right? So I would want to know if you had a concussion management system, right? So I would imagine we use. I'd imagine you guys use some sort of technology to assess and manage concussion. So that would be another data source that we would be able to blend across your medical record data to find some insight and find some value in those otherwise disparate data sources, right?
Could you talk about the same process for the educator? So we have a research emphasis in our program, and we have multiple partners, multiple universities, multiple high schools, professional sports. Would you be able to work across multiple programs and different software in order to put something together for an educational program so our students could find a way to use that data for research?
Right. I do think there's some opportunity to consolidate a lot of these data from multiple and geographic locations, right? So, and student research is a big part of the profession, and if we're able to consolidate all that clinical data and to aggregate it, I think we have a powerful tool. And the biggest challenge we have is that we still have some of these on-premise deployments, and by that I mean like the data center or the data that you collect, part of these systems is stored on campus. So historically that presented a very big challenge, but now with cloud infrastructure, we can blend that data across those different campuses. So I do think that I do think there is an opportunity there.
Do you think it's something we can use for educational data as well? Like you mentioned, with our standards changing, we're now going to have a lot of master's programs. If we're looking at clinical outcomes of the students, can we apply the same type of program?
Yes. Yeah. So nice thing about this is these systems are agnostic to the data, right? You can supplant one of these data analytics infrastructures on top of any type of data. So I think we talk about democratizing the data to people like educators. It's the same infrastructure. It's just the data that's underlying changes.
And we talked about FMS a little bit before, but could you just kind of walk us through the process? If I'm an athletic trainer and I collect, just for example, FMS data on all my athletes, and we reach out to you and we want to have this type of infrastructure with our data, what process do we go through? How would I work with you and your company to get that data where it needs to be?
Right. So we I wouldn't ask you to give me your data. I would work with you with your data. We would work to get it into a location in the cloud, whether it be with Microsoft or whether it be a file sharing system. Usually the structure that we deal with a lot of CSV file, like Excel, right? So that's very accessible. Something we can store securely in the cloud. And then what we would do is we would start building these dashboards around the data. We want to clean the data. We want to look at its structure and its format. Specifically the FMS. The FMS is pretty structured data when you think about it. Structured meaning it's easy to put in rows and columns and score in the column and the test in the row. So once we have a structured kind of approach to it, the analytics really falls out of that, and we can build dashboards and give you access to those dashboards through a secure connection that you own all the software, right? You own all of the infrastructure. I'm more of the traditional consultant that comes in and helps you build it, right?
There's obviously a cost associated with all that. So have you had any athletic trainers apply for grants and reach out to you for advice? Like, obviously you could come up with a pretty strong grant proposal just based on what we've talked about so far. But do you have any advice for athletic trainers who are trying to find a funding source and trying to come up with a grant proposal?
Yeah. The cost of this 15, 20 years ago would have been, I think for a lot of athletic training, would have been cost prohibitive. But with storage resources like vastly outpacing software right now, it's quickly becoming very cost effective to do things like this. Where the cost will go is when you start looking at the data and start trying to crunch the data. That's where we get to the kind of limits of our understanding as athletic trainers, and we tend to reach out to a statistician to help us, or we reach out to a researcher to help us. So, but from the infrastructure standpoint and the software standpoint, it's fairly cost effective to do this in the cloud.
All right. So again, looking at it from the secondary setting, have you had any clients at all? Because like I said, here at Pasadena, we don't have a whole lot of that, but I know some of the schools like Allen High School here in Texas. They've won several state championships. They have like 7 athletic trainers or something like that crazy. Or that's DeSoto, but Allen has like 4 athletic trainers. So they have a lot of people, a lot of hands to kind of collect that data, and they have a lot of people also saying, "Hey, try out my product. Hey, try out my product," because there's a lot of visibility with a team like that. So, have you done any sort of work with secondary schools so far?
I have not. So, but I haven't been in that environment for a long time. But I have seen here locally that here in Southern California that the outreach model is continuing, and I think those organizations that manage those high schools kind of under that outreach model, I think have a huge opportunity to learn a lot about prevalence and incidence of injury at the high school level. I just don't know. I don't know really what their infrastructure is like or what they're collecting, because I know cost is something that's a major challenge at that level. But I have yet to have the opportunity to work with any high school athletic trainers in that regard. But we are. I'd love the opportunity to work with an outreach model. I think if they had a standardized medical record system, kind of like the concept we were just talking about, if they had a standardized medical record system and they had 20 high schools, I think the amount of value there has to be value in that data, right? But I just don't know. I'm in the process of finding out what that infrastructure is like with an outreach model. I come from the Division I level where, each of the institutions usually use their own system, and it's kind of siloed, like you were saying. Like you were saying earlier. So but I do think from a practitioner value standpoint, and from an outcome standpoint, the outreach model, just because of the reach that they have these larger systems, I think there is some value in that data. I just don't know how they're leveraging it, and would love to help them out if they were interested.
All right, dream world 10 years from now, where do you see Preveticx, and how do you see it changing our profession?
Great question. I'm in my first year, so this has kind of been a big roller coaster for me, and especially changing from the clinical setting. It's been quite the challenge, but I think perfect world. I see athletic trainers. I think I would see athletic trainers leveraging data, as much as you see sports scientists leveraging data. Like we collect it, we are required to collect this, and we're required to have a certain standard of data collection. And I see Preveticx being able to help out with maximizing patient care by uncovering the hidden insight in this data. And I really think athletic training is well positioned for this. It's just we have to invest in our data. We have to invest in our infrastructure. And that's kind of where I see me being able to help out as far as a small business owner, but I love the profession of athletic training, and I think we're well positioned for this. Like I mentioned, but I think if we don't invest in our clinical health informatics infrastructure, I think we run the risk of being kind of surpassed by other disciplines like, for example, the sports science and the strength and conditioning and the performance side, who are leveraging and who are making that investment.
Can you give some advice to the athletic trainer that works maybe at a smaller school, or in not everything's like Texas. So where I'm from, there's one athletic trainer to sometimes 3 high schools in the area, so they may not be collecting a whole lot of data, and sometimes they have to even defend that their salary, that they need to be part of the budget. So can you talk about the other end a little bit outside of injury prevention, but maybe data that the parents want to see in the high school setting, or how the athletic trainer is saving money and reducing healthcare barriers? Can we still use your software for that type of research?
First, nowhere else is like Texas. We got to get that straight.
Never seen high schools this big till I came to Texas.
Yes, Texas is Texas. That's all we need to say, right? So go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, they say Texas size for a reason, right? Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. The challenge for the athletic trainer that works multiple high schools, they're the and I sometimes I don't know how they do it, but there is some challenges there. But I think if we can start to take some CPT code data and at least put a value to the treatments that we are doing and the data that we are collecting, I think that's a start to start to be able to give back to stakeholders. I saved, or I generated, or I saved you X amount of money this month by driving across the city and covering this sport. So I think that's a start. And then from a parent standpoint, I was talking to an old student athlete of mine, and I don't think she's a parent yet, but we were talking about, if a student athlete was injured for the first time, and a lot of high school student athletes do experience an injury for the first time. If they had a system, or if they had an ability to ask questions and get data-driven answers rather than subjective experience. For example, she was going through some rehab for a lower extremity injury. And it was a little bit unique of an injury. And she was like, I asked her, I said, would you, if you were going through this again and you had these questions of what the chances I'm going to need surgery on this? What are the chances I'm going to need an MRI on this injury? Instead of us responding to that question as an athletic trainer with subjective experience, your demographics might be different than the county next door or the state next to you. But to be able to say, yeah, 30% of the time, this type of injury with this, the prevents like this is going to require an MRI, or 15% of the time, this injury requires surgical intervention. I was asking her about this, and I said, would you like a system like that? And this was 7-8 years ago, but she was like, well, duh, yeah, that doesn't exist. And I'm like, we are way far from that. But the funny thing is, we're very capable of doing that now. So from a parent standpoint and a risk mitigation standpoint, I think data can drive some of those verticals as well. And give some comfort to a family that is experiencing soft tissue injury for the first time.
I talk to a lot of athletic trainers, and I don't enjoy collecting the data. I don't enjoy doing the paperwork. I don't enjoy looking at the data. Right? The only reason I do it is because I've had so many conversations on the podcast or at presentations. And so if I'm talking to somebody on the podcast or at a presentation, right, then what do you think I should be telling them? How should I encourage them to begin collecting data? And then I guess, what are the best ways to do that?
Yeah, I think it all starts with a strategy, right? You have to have a strategy on what you're collecting, right? And I believe there's a position statement out from the NATA on some level of documentation, but I think if you're looking, okay, how do I start? I think you really have to understand what you want to collect and how you're collecting it. So just an example, part of part of the regrowth of Stanford sports medicine, we completely overhauled some of the way we were documenting on sports injury. And we set forth minimum standards. So if a student athlete walks in and they have a sport-related musculoskeletal injury, you have to document minimally these 16 things. If someone comes in with a stomach flu, a non-sport related injury or something, and that you were going to refer almost immediately, you had to document these 8 things, let's say. So having a strategy on what you're documenting and how you're documenting it, so it becomes second nature, and you know exactly what you're doing. And software can automate some of this. Your medical record can automate some of these things for you, but I think that's the first, and that's the first strategy.
You really took a chance and did something completely different that's really benefiting our profession. But do you have any advice for the athletic trainer who's thinking about making that leap and stepping out of the traditional setting to do something a little bit different?
Yeah, keep thinking about it. I think that's the best. They say, if you have a thought that, if you have an idea, and you find yourself thinking about it throughout the day, keep thinking about it. I love the profession of athletic training. I don't think I fell in love with it 17, 18 years ago. And it is a great profession, but it allows you to do so many other things as well. We have a wealth of knowledge, and that knowledge is growing. And I think whether it's high school, whether it's high school outreach, Division I traditional setting, there's huge opportunities for athletic training, and I would say just keep thinking about it, and we have so much experience and wealth of knowledge that we can influence this healthcare system, I think, for the good.
I just talked to Adam Larson from Athletic Training Box, and his is a subscription-based service where they send you a box of goods, and it was the same thing. He had this idea, and he just kind of held on to it. And like after that, I mentioned to my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, that same thing." She had an idea of like, we need to create a space for people to just take a nap, right? Because we were young parents, and she was tired all the time having to stay up, and so now she found out there's nap bars or something like that, and so I was like, see, should have stuck with it. Should have kept thinking about it, creating an idea and a plan. And so, yeah, just that the same thing is keep thinking about it, create a plan, talk to some people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you'll find inside the profession, you'll find people that think the same way. They're a little bit harder to find, but you will find people that have that disruptive way of thinking. And I think that is much needed in this profession. I think we're in an inflection point with athletic training. In a lot of ways, data and technology and health informatics, I think, is we kind of cringe at it and we kind of shy away from it. But there are people inside the profession that are disruptive thinkers, and that's what we need. So if you have that idea, keep thinking, because it's more than likely it can be disruptive.
So if you were in the position to hire someone to help you out, for all of the people out there that are interested in this field, could you talk about characteristics that you'd be looking for that would benefit your business, or people that are into stats, people that are into research? Like, what would you be looking for your perfect candidate?
Yeah, good question. I think right now we're we're a very small company. We're growing, but people that are interested, I think, have to. I think have to have that growth mindset, and I think we're starting to see athletic trainers across the country adopt that growth mindset. The stats background is very helpful when we get to the analytics phase. But from if you're gonna remodel your house, I would be looking for more of kind of like the database management side as well. Probably the one thing I didn't do, which sometimes I kind of think about and I kick myself for not doing it, but was learn to code. That's probably one skill that I don't have. So if there are any athletic trainers that know how to code in multiple languages, which that would be like finding Yoda, but that is something that is a skill set that is highly valuable. Not only being able to code, but to understand medicine and sports medicine and rehab medicine. I think that's the blend of the two characteristics that make it hard to find. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Good. All right, so I know Joe Scarcella, Brandy Curry, Adam Larson, Max Mahaffey, Scott Mullet, we're all checking in live, joining the live stream there. So Kevin, as we're kind of closing out there, we're talking about Preveticx. What else would you say to any one of us, because we are athletic trainers, about preventative data analysis?
Yeah, there's untapped, there's a quote out there, Peter Sondergaard, the director of global research for Gartner, and it says, information is the oil of the 21st century. Analytics is the combustion engine. If there's one thing I could say, that there's untapped wealth of information inside of the data that we are collecting. Like securing that data and is securing that data is tantamount. However, there's a load of wealth inside that data. I think that if we can learn to unlock and learn the tools to get into that data, we will find something special and unique.
All right, so I want to remind each of you listening to check out the sponsors, because they're the ones that support the show and help me pay the bills and have these cool t-shirts that I'm wearing if you're watching the live stream. So check all of those out. Again, that's on the website, Sports Medicine Broadcast. Dr. Harrison, final thoughts about data analytics, Preveticx, the future of athletic training?
I love research. That's why I got a PhD. So anyone that's thinking about continuing their education, I know a lot of people are hesitant, but it's only going to help our profession, as Kevin has stated. So keep doing the research, keep collecting the data, reach out to people like Kevin if you need help, and just keep plugging.
I like that shirt, Jeremy. I do. That's a sweet shirt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hopefully I can bring you one if you're at an NATA there. You're right in your backyard. So. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right, Kevin, somebody wants to get a hold of you. You said website is a great way, or your email, which is kevin@Preveticx.com, which is Preventicx.com. So you can reach out to Kevin via his email. So it's just kevin@Preveticx.com, or the website, which is Preveticx.com. Dr. Harrison said you can Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram. No, she really just said hit her up on the email, which is lharris5@central.uh.edu, or you can find her on Twitter, which is Lacey J, which is LAYCIJ. And of course, I am Jeremy Jackson. Looking anywhere on the Sports Medicine Broadcast, you can find information about me. So this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/preventative data. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/preventative data. And then also when you go to sportsmedicinebroadcast.com, that'll have the National Athletic Training Month if we're doing the giveaways there, or it also have a link to like the sponsors and supporters. So check those out for me. It helps me pay some of the website hosting bills and stuff like that. So for Kevin Robel of Preveticx, for Dr. Lacey Harrison from the University of Houston Master of Athletic Training Program, and for Jeremy Jackson. Did Yellen tell you that you have to do a plug for U of H? Every time he's on this, he's like, you can find us at.
He didn't, but you should find us on Facebook because I do a lot of the posting. So there's fun stuff on there. And that's Master of Athletic Training Program at the University of Houston. Go Cougs.
All right. So if you want to check out the U of H MAT program, you can do it that way as well. So for Jeremy, Dr. Harrison, Kevin Robel, that is a wrap. Thanks.